the hero is always, who is the person you're talking to?
Mm-hmm.
The audience is the hero. We have to step back from our ego, which we all have, and remind ourselves we're not always the hero of the company or the story we're telling. We have to think about the ultimate hero. Who do we want to inspire?
Welcome to Cause and Effect, a podcast brought to you by the Dunham Podcast Network.
Here, we will provide a fresh voice that breaks down the most recent leadership lessons, fundraising trends, and the ups and downs within the nonprofit industry.
And our goal? Increasing your effectiveness for more impact.
Welcome to this episode of the Cause and Effect podcast. I'm Trent Dunham, your host, president, and CEO of Dunham+Co. And today our guest is Matthew Luhn. If you are a frequent viewer, especially, also a listener, but especially in this context, a viewer of the podcast, you see a bit of a different background than our normal set, and that is because we are not in home base. We are actually at our annual summit where we host our clients together, our ministry partners, and we spend time hanging out together. We have a lot of fun, but we also learn a lot, and we're going to talk about some of the learning aspects today of Summit. Our particular session we just walked out of was a presentation that Matthew Luhn gave. And I'm excited for this conversation. And first of all, thank you for sharing with our folks today. It was awesome.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So Matthew, you, I think we should start with the most obvious thing. So like, hey, who is Matthew and why would I want to listen to him?
Okay.
So maybe just what are some of the kind of top line things that people would know about you and recognize quickly, like Matthew has done this?
Okay. Well, I would say definitely the Toy Story films.
Mm-hmm.
That comes out at the very top. But on those Toy Story films, as a animator on the first Toy Story film, one of the first 12 animators when I was 20 years old. And then later working on the other films, Toy Story 2, 3, 4, as a writer, storyboard artist, supervisor. And then outside of the Toy Story realm, I did also work on Monsters, Inc., Monsters University, Finding Nemo, Ratatouille, Up, Cars, the whole Pixar, classic library.
Yeah.
So.
It's just so cool just to think about how so many of those films kind of shaped an era of entertainment, especially for a generation of kids, really, and parents.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, as a kid, and I think I don't want to take away, but where we're located right now is at one of the happiest places on earth.
Yeah.
We are at the Magic Kingdom in Orlando. And as a kid, I grew up just obsessed with Disney, all things Disney, Disney animation, the parks, everything. Had a dad who loved all things Disney. So to have worked on all of these movies and now see how Woody and Buzz have become, standing right there next to Mickey and Donald and Goofy, it's surreal. It's humbling. But it's also just like, it's just awesome.
It's the best.
Well,
it's fun hearing kind of the output. I mean, that's what everyone is going to recognize. But today in our conversation, because, our audience are ministry leaders, organizational leaders, people who are leading churches, parachurch organizations, nonprofits. And the core of your talk today was around storytelling and the importance of it. And I think we can't, in some ways, the average leader or person involved in ministry relate directly to what it takes to write a full-length feature film that's animated, that connects with people and makes my favorite thing, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but my favorite thing in movie history is the first 10 minutes of Up. You asked me yesterday when we were kind of walking, what are your favorite Pixar films? And if you remember my response, it was Up and Ratatouille, right? So and I think the reason Up is because of that first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then to your point that you made today, you're connected. You want to see how it turns out.
Yep. And just to remind the audience out there, the first 10 minutes of the movie Up, there's no characters talking.
Yep.
It's just visuals, music, and the art.
Yeah.
But through the power of storytelling, making people laugh, cry, and feel something, you're so hooked after watching the first 10 minutes of the movie up that it doesn't make a difference if you got to go to work, feed the dog, the kids, whatever. You're going to watch the next 80 minutes of this movie
Yes.
because the story impacted you
Yes.
so much. And there's a real science behind impacting people with a story.
Yeah.
A good story.
And I'm hopeful that as you're listening or watching today's episode of the podcast, that part of our conversation will help you find out a best way to tell a story in the context in which you lead. And so, the most obvious ways in which we can tell stories for any type of organization is the testimonial of a life changed through what we do. That's probably the top line.
Yep.
But there in life, 100 different ways that we tell stories, 100 different ways that we connect people to mission or to vision or to what's next or the outcomes by using story. And I think that's what, as you listen today or as you watch, that you would have that in the back of your mind through our conversation is, oh, my context of how I share a story is this. I can see how our conversation today applies to that. I should be thinking about ways to be better at how I do that.
Yeah.
If I was to say, like, that's the top line takeaway, be thinking of that as our conversation progresses throughout the day. But as far as backstory goes, I think it's just fascinating, your family history, because and how that drove you into a desire to be an animator initially. And so maybe just even give us the brief overview of how your family then pushed you into this gracefully into this whole new world.
Well, we're all born in a this world. We don't know why, but our situation. But I just happened to be born in a family that owned toy stores.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it was normal, some of my friends, their parents were teachers or dentists or lawyers. My parents, sold Barbie and Mr. Potato Head. Yeah. So, but my family owned this chain of toy stores in San Francisco. There were 7 toy stores, but my grandparents owned it before them. My great-grandparents owned it before them. Wow. So you can see that toys have definitely run in my blood.
Yeah.
And then just the stars aligned. Things happened where there was a very small startup company named Pixar that knew me. They knew my family owned toys. They knew I loved animation. And they wanted to make a film called Toy Story. Mm. And from toy stores to Toy Stories, this has been my story.
What better guy for a Toy Story movie than you? With your background, your family history, and all that stuff. So you made a decision, and in fact, I'll reference it now, but I encourage you to get a copy of Matthew's book. I read his book this year, The Best Story Wins, and a lot of our conversation will center around some of the things included in here, but it's a great reference point. I am not a preacher. I do a fair amount of public speaking. And so even as a public speaker, there's so much advice in here that I can implement into that to connect with people around a relevant topic and make sure that I'm carrying them through an entire 45-minute presentation or something in an engaging way in which they'll actually leave remembering what I want them to remember.
Cool.
So I would encourage you to get a copy of the book. But the framework that you kind of share in the book and the way that you unpack how you guys came to bring to life all of the movies that you referenced started beforehand, your love for a particular show called The Simpsons that you did actually work on beforehand, right?
Yes, right. So, my very first animation job when I was 19 years old, still plenty of acne. I think I had my retainer and everything still. Was animating on the 3rd season of The Simpsons. And I was just recently talking to someone, I think actually on the bus, heading to the dinner last night, of moments in our life where are really these, like I could have made a choice that went a completely different way. And just to give you a little, background on how this moment happened, because how does someone who's 19 years old work as an animator on The Simpsons? Well, I'm I'm at an animation school, an art school. It happened to be an art school in Los Angeles that had been created by Walt Disney. So it was very much an animation school. And I was in my freshman year. I had made an animated short film, like the students are required to do, like you're writing a thesis paper. And I just made something I thought was funny, something I thought was entertaining, but it caught the eye of a Pixar, a director at The Simpsons, when The Simpsons had only been on the air for 2 years.
I got it.
He saw it, he loved it, and animation was just coming out of a kind of a low point in animation industry and becoming popular again. There wasn't a lot of people in the animation industry. They needed employees, and on the spot, he offered me a job.
That's crazy.
To be an animator on the 3rd season of the show. Now, I'm 19. I haven't even finished my first year of college. And I guess you're thinking, I need to say, no, I need to finish 4 years of college first before I get a job, right?
Right.
But for me, I think it was probably because of my upbringing of, take chances when they come your way. I said, yeah.
You jumped.
I want to do it.
Yeah.
Now, I could have said, I should stay in college first and be the responsible kid. And I would have lost that opportunity, and probably my life might have gone on a different trajectory.
Yeah, for sure.
But I took the job, became an animator on the 3rd season of The Simpsons. I always joke around and say, yes, the best season of The Simpsons, because I really think it is. And that was my first step into the animation world.
Yeah. And as you tell your story, it was animation, and then you started to work on the Toy Story films, and then progressing over time, you shifted really into the role of storytelling and overseeing that process for a lot of the films that you worked on. And it's that storytelling part that I think we want to focus our conversation on today, because it's that skill that helps engage an audience. I loved how you opened your talk, because you opened it with a stat, and the point was that stats don't stick.
Yeah, no, it really is true. I mean, just think about when you were a kid in school, and the teacher is drilling into you the facts and figures to do well on a test, to get a good score, a good grade. How many of us actually retain that information after the test?
Yeah,
right.
Little.
We cram for it. It's stuck in our mind for a short period of time, and then it disappears.
Yep.
Well, this is the same thing that happens in our business life, our ministry life, our life as just humans. We don't retain facts and figures unless there's a story attached. There's got to be something that makes it stick in our mind, that has something to do with characters, with change, with story, with emotion. And that is why when you share just the facts and figures, when you quiz people 10 minutes later, they will only retain 5% of what you said.
Yeah.
So think about all those death by PowerPoints we go sit through, right?
Yeah.
Is it really the best use of our time if people are not retaining anything afterwards?
Yeah.
But if you have a story weaved in there, when I'm talking story, I'm talking about testimonials, metaphors, experiences. That acts like the glue that makes people remember the information.
Yeah.
Because stuck to that story is the facts and figures.
Yeah.
So then 10 minutes later, you give yourself, like they say, a 65% better chance people will remember what you said.
I mean, it makes total sense. We've all been there. We've all had those moments. We all taken those tests and forgot it the next morning.
Yeah.
And it does make sense. And when you talk about story, as we relate it to our work, I think primarily organizations do a really poor job telling their story, because they make it all about themselves and not about the person or the outcome or the life change. And so it becomes, look at us organizationally, help us organizationally. But organizations, they don't have personality, generally speaking. They don't change really. They're amorphous. And so it's really difficult to capture a heart when you're making it about us.
Yep. That is one of the big things that I help companies with when I come in to help them rebrand or rewrite or figure out their story is, who is the hero?
Yep.
I mean, that's the number one thing you're thinking of as a director and writer, as an author of a book or making a film or a TV show. Who is this for?
Mm.
So as a company, there are times when you're the hero.
Yeah.
You're sharing your career path story. How did our company get started? What did we go through? What did we learn to be able to become who we are today? Yes, you're the hero in that story. But the hero is always, who is the person you're talking to?
Mm-hmm.
The audience is the hero. So then you really got to think about that and say to yourself, okay, whether you're selling a widget or you're inspiring people through a sermon or me making a movie, the audience is the hero, and you're going to put them through a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think to yourself, okay, well, me as the CEO or the pastor or the director, who am I then?
Yeah.
If I'm not the hero, well, when you think of the other characters and stories, you have allies, right? You got Harry Potter, but then you got his friends, Hermione and Ron. You got Luke Skywalker, the hero, but you got, Han Solo and Leia and the droids and the Wookiee and stuff. Those are the ally characters.
Mm-hmm.
We all need ally friends to help us through our journey to reach whatever goal it is. But for us, the people who are owning the company or the church or whatever, we need to see ourselves as the mentor.
Mm.
So the mentor character in stories are the ones that give the hero the instruction and the inspiration on how to get to their goal. And they usually give the hero a tool, a lightsaber, a wand, a pair of ruby slippers. Sometimes that object, being we're at Disneyland too, I'm thinking of Dumbo with the black feather that, you can fly Dumbo, right? But sometimes it's not even a thing we're giving to the hero. It's a different way of thinking about life.
Yeah.
Like in the Karate Kid, karate is not just to, beat up your enemy, but it's to be able to defend yourself, right? So the mentor is a big part of the story. And that magical tool or that thing we give to the heroes to help them reach their goal can be anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be an iPhone. It could be a Bible. It could be your first art set of, really nice pencils or something. But we have to step back from our ego, which we all have, and remind ourselves we're not always the hero of the company or the story we're telling. We have to think about the ultimate hero. Who do we want to inspire?
It's really good. And I think in the nonprofit context, if our mission is to feed the hungry, or if it's to provide shelter, or so humanitarian, if it's evangelism or whatever it is, there's a beneficiary of the work that's done, and the hero in that context obviously are the people that receive it, but they're also the people that help make that possible. So when we're speaking to an audience that is helping to make that ministry possible in the form of a donor or a volunteer or whatever that is, our hero in that context is the donor. It's not because we are so great that this happened and the ministry was done. It's because you enabled that to happen. And I think oftentimes we blur the lines between the volunteer, the donor, the participant, and the organization, and we can default sometimes to just using we language. It's really you language. You made this possible.
Yeah, and you really have to think about that. You may have a presentation, but you will have to adapt it in the way of, who am I pitching to? Is it the end user of the product? Is it the person who's going to be getting that food or that help? Or is it one of the people in between leading up to it? So you always have to think about who is the hero of the story.
So that's a great takeaway.
Always adjusts.
Who's the hero? Ask that question. Your creative team should be asking that question. Who's the hero in this communication piece? Are we creating a video that is going to play in a service? Well, who is that video intended to inspire or engage? I love, and I think this will be helpful for pretty much every role I can think of associated with nonprofit ministry work, is telling a good story. You gave a structure to telling a good story. And I think if there's one thing that the audience today, our listeners or viewers, could walk away with. It's a basic understanding of a story structure. So if I'm about to produce a video, or if I'm about to tell a story, if I'm about to engage someone, just talk at a high level about the story structure.
Okay, so to keep it as simple as possible, there is a beginning of a story, a setup, a middle of a story, the build, and the end of the story, the payoff. Setup, a build, and a payoff. We need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, whether it's 90 minutes or 90 seconds. Okay? Now, what is needed in the beginning and what is needed in the middle and needed in the end, that can get more, with the amount of time you have, that can get more complex. Okay? I'm not trying to push my book, but for if you want to dive into that more, it's in that book.
That's right.
But you know, the setup is basically setting up the ordinary world. This is what we do in every Pixar film. A world of toys, and here's the rules of toys. When humans are around, play dead, right? There's a leader in the room. He's Woody, right? The fate of toys is kind of up in the air, especially in the movie Toy Story. Andy's going to have a birthday.
Yep.
There could be a new and better toy. One of us may get thrown in the garbage. And Andy and his mom are going to be moving soon. What if one of it gets left behind? You're setting up all of these, what we call the storm on the horizon.
Here you go.
What could potentially go wrong? This makes the audience go, I want to see what could go wrong.
That's right.
So you're kind of giving what I always say is kind of like a little story appetizer of why it's worth it for you to listen to the rest of my presentation or watch this movie for 90 minutes. That's the setup. And also in the setup, there is this story could work out good. This story could work out bad. Sit back and enjoy the ride. The middle, okay, I hope I'm not making this too long.
No,
like
you're
you
not.
said,
This is great.
But I'm getting excited about it now. The middle of a story is the most challenging. Because we all know the middle of the movie or the TV series or the book, I mean, we can get distracted because the mistake that authors, writers, directors, preachers, presenters make is they start to get lost in the kind of details. I'm going to say the details, but let's just say the obstacles. And then this happened. And then this happened. And then, so you're already getting bored, aren't you? And then this happened, because Act 2 is not just bad stuff the character went through. They have to progress. So that means everything they go through has to get more difficult every time. When you put that in the wrong order and you start with the most difficult thing and then they get progressively less difficult, you get bored. If they're all even, you get bored. They have to get progressively more difficult. The threat of the antagonist, the villain, the stakes have to get deeper and deeper so the audience doesn't fall asleep. And during Act 2, the character changes. They start to learn to be more caring or more courageous. Act 3 is the payoff. What did the character learn? And in turn, what the character learned, how did that change the world and the way the other characters in the story viewed life as a toy or a car or a monster or whatever? And there's an epiphany, a theme that everyone can relate to, where you're like, man, that was a toy, but I can relate with being insecure and fearing being abandoned. As a parent at my company, as a spouse, whatever, right? We're like, we can relate to that. Man, this is deep. And but the thing is, you can replace the world of toys, monsters, cars with any industry that you are in. It could be healthcare. It can be finance. It could be ministry. It could be amusement parks. It could be anything, right? And so this is not just for entertainment. This is really for anything. What is your ordinary world in your business life, in your personal life? what is working, what's not working, how could it be better?
Mm-hmm.
And painting a picture for people of what your future story could be like if you kind of follow my suggestions or my lead or my guidance.
That's good.
So,
That's good. And I encourage you just to think about how, in your context, does that fit? How can you begin to take the framework, simple framework that Matthew just explained, and kind of how does that apply to the audiences that we need to engage organizationally or I need to engage personally? The testimony is probably the easiest way for us to kind of relate to a story that's being told. And sometimes those fall flat because there isn't a dynamism to the story. There's not a big enough like life change, or there's obviously there's usually a big life change, or there wasn't a big enough challenge at the beginning, or to your point, we take too long to tell the story and there's backstory that's irrelevant, or all those kind of things. So, I think you mentioned at one point that, and I don't remember who you were referencing, but someone told you a story and it was like 90 minutes, but it could have been 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And the economy of words to really help, knowing that we only have 8 seconds to engage. Because you talk about the things that
the attention span of people,
the ingredients required to tell a good story, and that starts with the hook. And as you mentioned, we got 8 seconds to hook them.
Yeah, I mean, just think about the taglines that people use in marketing. Really, the key to focus on is like less than 4 words, right? So, just do it. I think the ultimate driving machine, BMW, that's 4, right? But even when it comes to the names of movies, Toy Story, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, and in the name of the story, it's also communicating what the story could be about.
Yeah.
So that is strategically done that way because people have a short attention span.
Yeah.
And you got to get to the point. So people, when it comes to taglines, when it comes to sayings or songs, the ones that stick with us, they're kind of clear and concise.
Yeah.
And sometimes it could happen by accident.
Yeah.
But in my case, there's a lot of iterations and a lot of back and forth to get to the best hook. And, when it comes to the hook for a movie, a book, whatever, you really want to try to keep it in one sentence.
Mm-hmm.
It's the elevator pitch.
Yep.
It's the same thing when you hear the elevator pitch for a movie. Now, I know I'm kind of commandeering the conversation here, Trent, now, but one of the things I would say for you guys listening out there, when you go from the hook, which could be just, a few words, and you build it into the elevator pitch for, like, let's say your company, right? What's your company about in one sentence? What is your, sermon going to be? Can you describe it in one sentence? In that one sentence, like an elevator pitch for a movie, you're going to have who's the hero in the story, what do they want, what did they go through, and what did they learn, And so in one sentence, I do have that in my book. It's the elevator pitch. It's the controlling idea. It's what is your brand story?
Mm-hmm.
And, I 30 years ago or 35 years ago or however many years now, when I first got into this business, I think that the attention span of people was a little easier
for sure
to get a hold of, because now when people are watching a movie, it's usually in a train and they're texting while watching the movie. They are constantly longing for the next dopamine hit and they don't have the patience to just sit and watch a 90-minute movie. So it's become even more difficult. And that breaks my heart.
Yeah, for sure.
And I hope something will change in the way, what we're learning with social media. But the hook is where it all starts, to get people's attention so that they'll listen to you.
And so I love the example you gave. I mentioned it earlier. I think it's some of the best 10 minutes in storytelling movie history is the first 10 minutes of the movie Up. If you haven't seen the movie Up, go just watch the first 10 minutes. You won't be able to, as Matthew said, like you're going to be pulled into the final 80, but But go watch it, because what it does, as you mentioned, no speaking. It's music and visuals only. And the story it tells in that brief time sets up such a dissonance with the viewer about what is going to happen next, or how this particular character proceeds in life.
Yeah.
Talk about, even at a high level, just how did you guys come to the place where that became the lead into a movie that became so kind of iconic?
Yeah. Well, okay. First off, I would say there is no like just magically you start writing and you do it once and voila, right? It's many iterations. And it's not just writing out the script and storyboarding it and showing it to a test audience, because we won't even show it to the test audience till years later.
Yeah.
It's just the back and forth with the story team of saying what is moving us. And we are people that understand how stories do work. So we're not just like a guy coming up to the plate, and hoping when I swing my bat, it's going to hit the ball the right way. We know if it needs to be a bunt, if it needs to be a line drive, like we know what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the first 10 minutes of the movie, we knew we needed to like release those chemicals like dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins. Now, in the regular world, that means a happy moment, a sad moment, and funny moments. And this is what really makes a really like complete good story. Because you can have a story that's just dopamine that makes people laugh from nonstop, beginning to end. That's just gags, but there may not be any heart.
Yeah.
And there may not be any emotion. So the best stories are the ones that tap into those three different chemicals. And that's what we did in the movie Up. We go from happy moments to sad moments to funny moments. And it's the same thing that happens to you when you go on a roller coaster ride, where there's the anticipation of going up, 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 up. Oh my gosh, I made a really bad choice. I shouldn't have picked this ride. And then, the dopamine of going up, the anticipation, it heightens our intensity. And that's what dopamine does when you are a comic leading up to the punchline. You're telling an anecdote, a story, a testimonial. People are wanting to know, so what's going to happen? That's dopamine. Oxytocin is when you then hit on a sad moment. And that releases that oxytocin that makes us have empathy for the CG characters in the movie, the 2D characters in the movie, or for real people. And when that oxytocin happens, we have empathy for the characters. Same thing in the, for people listening, it will make people tend to be more generous of their time and money. And they'll say, you know what? Maybe I do need to think outside of my own problems right now. There might be other people in need, because I just heard this story with a lot of, oxytocin empathy. And you start to care for people, even if it's cartoons or real people.
Yeah.
And then the third one is the making people laugh. We all need to laugh more. Right. Endorphins end up reducing anxiety. They make us more creative. And there's a couple ways to release endorphins. Yes, make people laugh. But also, yes, taking a walk, exercise, dance, even washing dishes, something that's moving your body and getting you out of that stagnant sitting position, hunched over, focused on your computer or your phone. Releasing those endorphins will make you and your team more creative. So those are those three things I focus on in a story, and I go back and forth between them, so they're juxtaposed.
Yeah.
And that is what makes a very complete meal instead of just all dessert or all the vegetables. It's a little bit of both, and it makes it more fulfilling.
It does.
As a story.
Just even thinking about how we share the outcomes of a life change through ministry done is you're presenting at some point a challenge, a sad fact about a life. A life without Jesus is a sad fact in and of itself. but then we're creating that emotional transition to a life changed and what is happening now. In that first 10 minutes of Up, it is up and down, up and down, up and down. And all of those ups and downs were ups and downs we could immediately relate to.
Yeah.
And I think that's another point that you made, which is the
universal themes.
Universal themes. Thank you. And because we could all relate to every one of those emotive swings, sometimes they're so complex or hidden or experienced only by a certain type of person in a certain situation, we can't relate. And so we can't travel that pathway.
Yeah. You know, I mean, there's certain times when you want to make a story connect with one individual over a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're like, what's important to the person I'm talking to?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have kids?
Yeah.
Do they hate kids? Do they like a dog or a cat better? Do they like traveling or sitting on the couch more at home? You got to know somebody before you weave that story.
That's good.
But the thing is, what happens when you're speaking to 10,000 people, or even more people are listening, or the whole world is watching the movie? How do you connect with every single person in that movie theater? Well, it goes beyond just those little individual things. It's the big picture of the desire for love. Everybody around the whole world longs for love.
That's right.
From the moment they're born.
Yeah.
You know, you want a mama, you want dada, you want to be loved. And, you know, there reaches a point, unfortunately, where we've all gone through heartbreaks.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's universal themes around things like the desire for love and wanting to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, feel safe in your family, your community, the world. And then having the freedom to want to choose your own fate in life, you know. Like I mentioned, my dad, or maybe I didn't, but my dad took over the toy store, like all the people in my family, but he wanted to be a Disney animator. But, you know, it was just that period of time, you know, where it was you do what your dad did or your parent did. And those types of universal themes are the ones that we had in Finding Nemo. Wanting to protect your loved ones, keep them safe. Wall-E, the desire to find love. And Ratatouille, doing a job you were not, a dream that you want to do that you were not built for, you know, or not designed for. But that connects with everybody.
It does.
And I think we need more stories like that, because it seems like the world is so divided right now, in our country, our world, that we need more stories that bring people together.
That's good.
Instead of, you know, dividing them.
Yeah, it's good. And you can see the power of a story in accomplishing a mission like that. The final thing that I'd love to just ask and get your perspective on, we haven't necessarily talked about this in particular, but as a person of faith, how has kind of your faith journey also informed the way you approach story writing?
Yeah, well, you know, the interesting thing, I won't get too much into this, but I was raised Jewish. I mean, we're talking bar mitzvah in Israel kind of Jewish.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Very proud of my Jewish culture. I love the whole Fiddler on the Roof kind of feeling of being Jewish, right? But while working on The Simpsons, of all places, I had a spiritual transformation.
Wow.
And it just happened to be somebody was, I don't know, brave enough or caring enough to share with me the big picture. And that sent me on a journey while drawing, you know, Homer eating donuts and burping, to actually explore my faith and to actually pick up the Old Testament and from Genesis start reading it, you know, while animating in LA, and then getting to the book of Matthew, which is a big no-no if you are Jewish, and reading the story of Jesus, and it changed me. And that began my journey as a Christian. And I definitely ended up seeing that the stories we were telling, while they were universal themes, they were also stories that could be connected to faith.
Mm-hmm.
They could be connected to redemption, salvation, forgiveness, all of those things. And I didn't really realize this until I started getting asked to come to churches to, give my testimonial. And people, were using Finding Nemo as an example for, as like a modern day parable,
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, okay, cool. But I do find it an honor and also a responsibility of like, who are the stories for I'm creating? What kind of message are they sending out? And, I don't want to make anything preachy.
Right.
That's the last thing we want.
For sure.
But what is the more redeemable messages in these stories? Because there is a real art, and I think Walt Disney was very good at this, of making things entertaining, but educating them as well. And that was really Walt Disney's thing. And when you go through the parks and when you see the movies, there's a message in there that is one to make us better as people, and so I see it as a real responsibility, and it gives me deeper purpose.
That's good.
As a storyteller.
That's good. And you can see how, to your point, how your faith has informed the way you approach some of the stories you even shared today. And I do want to encourage you, if you get a chance to get a copy of Matthew's book, The Best Story Wins. It's I really enjoyed the read. I said to you earlier, it's an easy read. And what I meant by that was, you don't want someone telling you through a book how to write a good story and then have to plod through it.
Yeah, right. That's really lets you know, maybe this person doesn't know what they're talking about. Yeah, I mean, I could have written that book and made it 500 pages long, right. But the stuff that's in that book, that's the good stuff.
It is.
And it's relevant to everybody.
Yeah. And the subtitle, How to Leverage Hollywood Storytelling in Business and Beyond, in Ministry and Beyond. If I was to change that just slightly for our context, very relevant, very applicable to the things that we do in the world in which we work. So Matthew, I just want to thank you for, first of all, being here
absolutely
in Orlando,
man.
With our people and building into them and encouraging them and inspiring them in how to tell their stories better for the ministry work that they're doing. And thank you for joining us today on
absolutely
on the
my
podcast.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And thank you for listening and watching today's episode of the Cause and Effect podcast. Join us again next time.
And thanks for listening to the Cause and Effect podcast, a resource developed by Dunham+Company.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. In the meantime, do us a favor. If you like this content, subscribe, share us with a friend, leave us a review on your podcast provider, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Dunham+Company to help us spread the word.
Thanks again, and join us next time as we work together towards increased effectiveness for more impact.